The film begins by showing a beautiful and smooth woman kneading cake dough. It turned out that behind the cracks in the walls there were two pairs of eyes enjoying the beauty of God's creation. The two men who did not sell it looked at it with high-voltage impulses. Not long after, a short and ugly man came carrying merchandise and was immediately angry at the behavior of the two depraved people. It turned out that the man was the husband of the beautiful woman named Wu Dalang. Instead of going straight away, the two of them beat Wu Dalang until he was helpless. Hearing the noise made the wife came out. The more visible her beauty and smoothness, so that the two depraved people were even more aroused and tensed until without thinking they ordered to leave the short man of her husband. But the wife even gave them an offer to beat her husband with a jagged wood. Seeing the woman's strange expression made the two of them leave from there. After that, the beautiful woman helped her husband carry his merchandise into the house. The beautiful woman called Pan Jinlian. Every day Dalang and Jinlian their lives as husband and wife selling cakes to the traditional market. Where the cake made is Jinlian and the Dalang who sells the cake to the traditional market. At the traditional market, the Dalang usually sells with a young man named Yun. Sometimes he be calm, sometimes annoying, even now when the Dalang is upset because last night he received an insult that pierced his heart, where the Dalang will be safe there because no snake will want be with him. This is what is sometimes called an incorrect friend. A few moments later, a crowd of people seen it. Turned out that there was a very great warrior who had conquered a ferocious tiger in the forest. The swordsman being paraded around the city by people. Some hunters who know his prowess then take him to a city called Yanggo, escorted by the local police. The puppeteer who saw it from a distance immediately felt happy because it turned out that the swordsman was none other than his own younger brother named Wusong. Wusong was the second child in their family, so the Dalang used to call him Erlang. In full it was Wu Erlang. With his short body, the Dalang cannot show himself to Erlang, who is surrounded by many people. Finally he took the stairs to call Erlang, and the attempt was successful. The younger brother was also finally able to look at his brother with a happy feeling, but suddenly he fell. Erlang immediately got off the stretcher and approached his beloved brother. The meeting of two brothers surnamed Wu, who after a long separation made them both happier. Erlang, surprised to see his brother, was in this city called Yanggo, even though he used to be in a city called Xinghai. It turns out that Dalang and his wife moved to this city because they experienced harassment and humiliation from their neighbors in the previous city. After that, Erlang immediately followed his brother to his house, leaving the soldiers who would take him to the officials in this area to give a position. At home, his smooth wife, who waited for the Dalang to arrive, wondered why there was still a lot of merchandise, but he had gone home. Finally, the Dalang told his wife that his younger brother, who was a great warrior, would come and live here. That way no one will dare to disturb and oppress him. Not long after, Erlang came with some wine to drink together. This is where moment of darkness and danger that shrouds this aura of happiness begins to emerge. Jinlian looked at his brother-in-law with a hot gaze full of wish. After that, Erlang, who was very respectful of his brother, asked his brother and sister-in-law to sit in front of him while he paid his respects to both of them. He did this as a way of paying homage to their parents who had already gone to another world. In the prostration, his brother-in-law Jinlian is getting more and more eager to see his valor. Even when eating with the smooth girl is getting more and more awkward. After getting drunk together, it was finally time to go back to the room. The Dalang, who was a little drunk from drinking alcohol, was trying to stabilize his wife, but Jinlian refused on the grounds that the Dalang drunk, so he was less excited to play now, even though he was thinking about his brother-in-law. In the dark, lonely night alone. Jinlian kneaded the dough with feelings full of lust and full of fear, because since meeting Erlang his heart has returned to feeling what he has wanted, namely worldly happiness that women crave, especially a beautiful and smooth woman, namely handsome, brave and strong man. That night reminded him with memories of the past, namely the circumstances that brought him to this place. It was noon in a town called Xinghai. Jinlian was a servant in the house of one. The nobles, with the beauty and grace of her body, made the master lose control and could not contain his lust to do steady with Jinlian, and in the end Jinlian entered the valley of worldly pleasures. While still tense, suddenly the noble's wife came and stopped the hot mode of the two of them. Even worse, the employer even accused Jinlian of teasing him. Finally, the noble wife was furious and made Jinlian have to marry the ugliest and old man in the city as punishment for his actions. He must willing to do the marriage or he will put in jail. That ugly person was none other than Wu Dalang. This disproportionate marriage made Jinlian and Dalang always insulted and harassed by their neighbors. Until finally the two of them moved to this Yanggo city. Well, that's how Jinlian married the Dalang, who nicknamed a dwarf in his city. After that, Jinlian intended to peek at Erlang, who at that time turned out be taking a shower. His burly body that seemed to glow when it splashed the water and reflection of the light made Jinlian hotter, and he even dared to wipe his brother-in-law's wet body. Fortunately, the brother-in-law refused and took very good care of her manners. The next day, when Erlang was going to help his brother sell cakes at the market, suddenly several government soldiers came and informed him that Erlang the Tiger Conqueror was officially appointed as the head of the police at this time, and even his uniform was given directly to Erlang. Seeing that Dalang was very proud of his brother, and this also made Jinlian even more fascinated. Sometime later, Erlang quelled several cases of crime, kidnapping, stabilization plans and others with his great ability be alert and responsive against these criminals, so that he was increasingly famous and respected by people, and because of his very good manners. One night at a sex resort there was a wealthy nobleman named Xi Menqing. He was in a state of confusion because tired of not finding the newest girl in this brothel, even though his wife was already many and beautiful. Finally the pimp came to him, calmed Xi Menqing's heart, and like a devil's whisper the pimp suggested that Xi Men look for another sensation to find a girl who could satisfy him with the typical Chinese proverb. The pimp brainwashed Xi Men. Legitimate wives are not as good as illegitimate wives. Illegitimate wives are not as good as prostitutes, and prostitutes are not as good as stolen ones. Means the pimp advised Xi Men to steal women. Maybe that way he would find a different sensation from before. The next day, on a fairly sunny half-day morning, Erlang, as usual, was well received by the public. And even the children liked and admired him. Jinlian heard the name of Erlang not far from the Dalang's house, so he immediately confirmed it through the window. Jinlian was so fascinated by his voluptuous sister-in-law that he didn't even realize he dropped the wooden support window of his house and hit Xi Men, who was walking aimlessly in front of his house. It was for the first time that Xi Men felt a very shaking heart when he saw Jinlian's smooth and passionate figure, and it made Xi Men melt. When he was about to return the stick, Jinlian immediately closed it. Next to Jinlian's house there is a tea shop owner named Wang Po, who turns out to know Xi Men. He knew that Xi Men, fascinated by Jinlian's beauty and refinement from this mother, Xi Men finally found out that Jinlian married to a short and ugly person, so he really regretted that a beautiful and smooth woman as smooth as Jinlian had to marry a bad person and was not worthy of him. Wang Po also warned Xi Men that Jinlian's husband is the older brother of the Tiger Conqueror, who is now the police chief, Wusong alias Erlang. After that, Xi Men's passion made him have a sinister plan to get Erlang out of the city. He went to a high-ranking official to give him a basket of happiness cakes, which he said made by Xi Men's wife, but when he opened them they were all gold. It was Xi Men's attempt to get the official to help him make Wusong alias Erlang leave this Yanggo city in some time. At the same time, at the Dalang's house, Jinlian made more cakes than usual. It turned out that the Dalang was selling longer in the market. After the husband left, Jinlian immediately took a shower, put on perfume and dressed well and ready. Charcoal, who do you think it's for? Where before he never paid attention to his appearance at the market in a very cold weather due to snow. Dalang offers his wares that are not selling well. Sometime later, when his brother came to help him after he finished his service. However, because the Dalang didn't want his brother, who had become the police chief, be sold, he finally told him to go home first. When he arrived at Erlang's house, he greeted with great joy by his sister-in-law. This is what makes Jinlian suddenly dress up seductively, besides that the food is also delicious, not as usual, and that's just to make Erlang tempted by him. Even he shamelessly dared to feed Erlang, but luckily he rejected by Erlang, and he saw a strange behavior from his brother-in-law. All kinds of seduction moves issued by Jinlian to move Erlang into the devil's pit, but it indeed Erlang's stance that upholds etiquette and manners, so that he does not want be immoral with his own brother's wife. The farther Erlang stays, the stickier Jinlian gets to him. This is because his lust is already at the top of his head. Jinlian's hot hug didn't make Erlang aroused, but instead got even more angry with the sister-in-law, who had no morals. He didn't even hesitate to slaughter Jinlian if bad rumors were heard about him. Not long after all that tension, the Dalang came with his wares. Jinlian, who couldn't help being embarrassed and hurt by Erlang, instead slandered her sister-in-law by telling the Dalang that Erlang had tried to do something nice to her, but the puppeteer didn't believe it. Now Erlang finally knows the true nature of Jinlian. Starting from here, there was a very great prolonged conflict in this family. Jinlian expressed all his heart that he tired of having an ugly short and old husband. Erlang is getting angry with Jinlian, who openly insults his brother, but the Dalang can handle the situation so that Erlang doesn't get angry. Not long after, a soldier came to see Erlang to immediately meet the official, be given assignment out of town. The next day it was time for Erlang to go out of town to deliver an item on orders from officials in the city Yangzhou, where it was all part of Xi Menqing's plan to get rid of the tiger warrior, who was none other than the younger brother of Dalang, the husband of the woman he was after, so that he could look for opportunities in the narrowness of getting to Jinlian. Before leaving, Erlang, who worried about his sister-in-law who had no morals, advised his brother be careful in living life without him, even if it was only for a few weeks, but now the Dalang will experience difficult times. The next day Xi Menqing came back to Wang Po to help him meet Jinlian. At first he pretended to sell expensively, but when she was given a silver bar his face looked more sly, but she still acted innocent, as if one rod was still lacking. Xi Menqing finally promised to give him more if he wanted to help him get Jinlian. An agreement reached, and Wang Po subtly came up with an alibi for Jinlian to come to this place, which was to tell him to sew clothes. Coincidentally, Jinlian was really good at sewing. When Jinlian was at Wang Po's shop to see the cloth he was about to sew, Xi Menqing suddenly walked in and pretended be surprised to see Jinlian here too, even though that was the plan. The two of them finally got acquainted, but only for a short time, because Jinlian said goodbye with an innocent face. The next day Jinlian went back to Wang Po's shop to do his sewing work, and at that moment Xi Menqing came back at once to measure the size of his clothes. Then Xi Menqing also brought a box containing jewelry to give to Jinlian. This was the first step to melt Jinlian's heart. After that, Jinlian returned to his house with the jewelry he had hidden from her husband so that there is no suspicion. Dalang then advised his wife to hurry home after her business finished, but Jinlian got angry at Dalang because she thought his husband was too restrained, and even besides insulting his husband's ugliness, he also always slandered Erlang. Currently Erlang is on his way with several soldiers to deliver an item out of town. After arriving at the destination, it turned out that the place was the base of the ruthless bandits. When one of the bandits' men was about to open the contents of the box brought by Erlang, he instead immediately attacked the eagle and followed the other bandits. Erlang's steady punch sent several of his enemies dropping the item box, and it turned out that the contents were all stones. This indeed a plan to kill Erlang. These bandits paid by Xi Menqing to deliver Erlang to another realm. When the bandit leader stepped forward, the sword he used could be easily parried by Erlang, but who would have thought that behind him there was a soldier who stabbed him? It turned out that he was also paid by Xi Menqing for kill him. Now Erlang knew that the one who ordered them all was a noble named Xi Menqing. After that, Erlang became even more furious and slaughtered everyone there without exception. Meanwhile, Jinlian, who had become more and more enamored with Xi Menqing, who besides being handsome was also the sultan with abundant wealth, finally returned to have a meeting, but this time Jinlian was bolder than before, because before he was still shy when he wanted to. The meeting this time was the same as the previous one, with the mode of making clothes, but now it looks better and trendy. Xi Menqing started conversation with an old-fashioned smack of seduction. After being hit by your stick, it felt like a part of my soul had disappeared. Soon Wang Po came to make sure things were safe under control, and before going out he also locked the room so that they were both more stable if something happened later. At first Jinlian refused Xi Menqing's offer of a drink and food to her, not for anything, but she was a little worried about her status as someone's wife. Usually in that atmosphere alone there is a demon in the middle but not visible. Xi Menqing then purposely dropped his chopsticks to take a closer look at Jinlian. When he saw Jinlian's shoes his mind got dirtier and bigger, also the forces of lust that pushed him from within to make him even more ferocious towards Jinlian, to the point of making Jinlian try to escape from there, but luckily the door locked by the cursed Wang Po. In that narrowness Xi Menqing tried to get a chance to get in touch with that smooth girl using coercion, until accidentally Jinlian slapped Xi Menqing, who was again in Sange mode. Finally, the last move issued by Xi Menqing, namely a high-level seduction that has taken many victims. I promise I won't leave you anything. Whatever you want I will do. I swear I will make you happy for the rest of my life. With the fuckboy mode, Jinlian just started to melt until he forgot that he already had a husband, and the desired thing happened. At first he wanted to make clothes, instead he took off his clothes. Not long after, Wang Po came again by opening the door lock, and as if surprised by the swaying bed, he screamed until Jinlian, who was in flight mode, scared, and this is the time for Wang Po to carry out his last plan, which is to threaten Jinlian to always be a reinforcement for Xi Men when even he needs, and be loyal to him if he doesn't want this incident will disseminate it to the people. After that, Jinlian came home sweating and trembling, a little afraid that her husband would find out that she had intercourse with another man. In gently advising Jinlian not to go to Wang Po's shop too often, because it turns out that the people here already know that Wang Po often brings together two of the opposite sex in his place. Therefore, Dalang was worried that his wife would fall into the vicious circle and Jinlian would get angry again for the umpteenth time. He did this to cover up his depravity. The next day, Jinlian secretly went to Wang Po's shop again while her husband was earning a living for the family. But this time, Jinlian caught by Dalang's friend Yun. When Jinlian entered Wang Po's shop out of curiosity, Yun finally took the stairs to look from the roof of the house, and he saw something very steady, the process of two cells meeting. After seeing all that, Yun finally went straight to the Dalang, who was still selling in the market. Hearing the news, the Dalang immediately rushed to his shop, Wang Po leaving his merchandise. When he arrived in front of the shop, Yun tried to trick Wang Po so that the Dalang could enter inside. The loud banging on the door by the Dalang made Jinlian, who was in the flight process, startled and scared, but indeed Xi Men, he casually opened the door as if nothing had happened. Finally, it discovered that his beautiful wife was having an affair with another man. Even though the Dalang was furious, he couldn't do anything because his short body was easily kicked and thrown by Xi Men until he fell from the floor above, and he ended up sustaining a serious injury. Jinlian, who feels guilty and afraid of his brother-in-law, tries to apologize to Dalang, but Dalang is already angry with his wife. Finally, Xi Men, Jinlian, and Wang Po plan to kill the Dalang. Where Wang Po suggests poisoning the dying Dalang with a poison called arsenic, which is usually used for pesticides and others. Then they immediately launched their plan to poison the Dalang, the medicinal potion that Jinlian made mixed with poison arsenic. After that, Jinlian and Wang Po went to the Dalang to take medicine to get well soon. Dalang has not been able to forgive Jinlian. A moment later, Wang Po seduced and fooled the Dalang that Jinlian been tricked by Xi Men until the Dalang finally agreed to forgive his wife. Only then did he take medicine from Jinlian, which turned out to be poison. The Dalang felt strangely suspicious and paused for a moment before Wang Po ferociously fed the drug into the Dalang's mouth until all the poison drunk by the Dalang. In the end, the Dalang was dying almost to death, after the cruelty of these two women became even more intense by holding the dying Dalang with a blanket until he finally breathed his last in a very dishonorable and very pathetic state. 1 week later, Erlang returned to Yangzhou City after receiving several wounds on his body from his earlier fight with the bandits. Here he sees an oddity where everyone stays away from him, and he finds Yun, a friend who has been with the Dalang in the market. It looks like he has gone mad, and it turns out that Jun been tortured by the Xi Men people to keep their mouths shut about everything that happened to the Dalang. Finally, after learning that his brother had died and killed by Jinlian, Xi Men and Wang Po, Erlang immediately rushed to his house. There was already a funeral altar for Wu Dalang. Not long after, Jinlian came in traditional Chinese mourning clothes. She cried in front of Erlang as a way of mourning the death of the Dalang, even though she was the one who killed her husband. From here, Erlang found out that his brother died of heart disease and even his body been autopsied and cremated or burned by government officials. Erlang already thought that Jinlian was behind the murder. Besides that, he also knew that Jinlian liked to go out of the house be seen from his shoes. He lied that since Dalang's death, she hasn't been anywhere. Even though she was having fun with Xi Men, even though Erlang thought Jinlian was the killer, he had to substantiate it with evidence. Finally, he went to the officer who autopsied the body of his brother, a person named Heiju. With great fear, Heiju then shows the part of the bone that he deliberately kept, even though he bribed expensively by Xi Men, but he knows that one day Erlang will come and will take revenge for his brother's death. It was only from the blackened bones that Erlang knew that his brother killed by poisoning, and the main culprit was the same person who had planned to kill him, namely Xi Menqing. He was also able to deduce the true motive of all this started from the assassination plot to himself until his brother's death was none other than Jinlian, the sister-in-law. After that, Erlang returned to his house with evidence and 2 police officers to drag Wang Po, who was also a suspect in the murder. Then Jinlian and Wang Po pointed at each other as the perpetrators of the Dalang murder. Finally Erlang rebuked them both to make Jinlian desperate. He sadly said that he just wanted to change the fate of the past. She never thought that she would become the wife of a short ugly person if it weren't for her former employer. Besides that, Jinlian was also about imagining that if Erlang had accepted his love, all of this would not have happened. Finally Erlang stabbed his sword at Jinlian and beheaded him to take him to Xi Menqing's place. He arrived at Xi Menqing's place, a person who had never met him or even knew Erlang, but only because he wanted to get his brother's wife. He committed heinous and evil deeds. Erlang also slaughtered all Xi Menqing's guards who got in his way. Then he threw Jinlian's head at Xi Menqing and started again massacring his guards. Finally he fought Xi Menqing, where in fighting ability he was far below Erlang, but he still had many bodyguards protecting him at a high price. In the end it was all over two human heads who were none other than Jinlian and Xi Menqing in front of him. Two adulterers who should have been stoned to death in very sad circumstances. The legend of the tiger conquering warrior massacring hundreds of people will become a history that will be remembered for generations of wusong. The lesson we can take from this film is that treasures of the throne and women are really tempting, but all of that will not taken away, because what will go with us all in the next world is our own charity. The movie end here. Thanks for watching Universe Recap.